Hey folks, just popping in here to remind you this is part 2 of a conversation that Brian and I started. I put up the other one last week. So you don't need to listen to the first part to understand this part, but it might be useful. And after you hear this part, you'll definitely want to go back and listen to the first part. The other thing I want you to know is we have some pretty tough stuff that we talk about in here. And as Brian really challenges me actually to I'm going to step up more and tell a little bit more about the details of what I know. So, which are not going to be quite stressful and upsetting. So, I just want to warn folks, please always take care of yourself when you're listening to these conversations, especially if you have direct experience in this area. Or with a landmark, some of this can be upsetting. So take breaks, reach out for support if you feel you need it, and just always take care of yourself. That's what matters most. All right. Thanks.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, medical, or mental health advice. We speak from our personal experiences and opinions. The views expressed are solely those of the individual speaker and are not intended to malign any group, club, organization, or business.
So I asked you to listen to the episode I did with Chris is starting to introduce this REM model of his. And you said that you listened and you had some thoughts and some questions. So I'd love to just open the floor to hear what you think,
Yeah.
how this all applies to what we're talking about.
It's interesting. And I'm gonna I don't know, it's a podcast, so you can edit stuff if you want to.
I sure can.
At about 9 minutes 25 to 12:30, there's a I caught you rationalizing that
Yeah.
the damage of the organization was not Warner's.
Really? Okay, tell me more. What'd you hear?
Like, it's not even about him. He only damages 10 people at a time. Mark was damaging groups of like 400 to 600 at a time. Like, it's what people do with the ideology that sometimes isn't even what the source would have done themselves. And it like slides right down that exit ramp into the head of one of those organizations always has a scapegoat.
Of
And
course.
it's designed so that they're not responsible for the fallout of people engaging in those things. Now, if anybody was going to actually hold members of that organization accountable, truly accountable for embodying those ideals, that ideology accurately, like fireable offense if you do not display these types of behavior, but no one is doing that. And it's not unknown.
Right. Yeah.
It's not unknown
Yeah.
that people are being assholes.
Right.
It's not unknown that harm is occurring. And even when that harm is brought to light, it's not addressed in what the rest of the world would deem an appropriate manner.
Right. Oh, that's such a good point. I think, yeah, because part of what I've been just realizing as, in my book, I'm dealing with how I'm starting to reconcile the damage that Warner's doing, right? But then in the year and a half since, I've been just flooded with how that's played out in the organization. And it's been, as I was sharing, it's overwhelming. But it's such a good point that, yeah, if Warner did actually step out and just own his own shit, like just start there, it would be heard not just through that organization, but through the self-help world, because there's a lot of that kind of abuse going on in that whole space, that whole industry, which is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's not anywhere. So yeah, I can see the piece that you're speaking to, but also, it's interesting because the people have come behind, like, I actually think Harry's in his heart, I think Harry's a good guy. I do. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I could totally be wrong. I do. My best friend still accuses me of way too much believing in puppies and unicorns, and probably true and whatnot. But, I don't think he's not volitionally harmful. He's fully indoctrinated himself. He's fully conditioned. He's been completely conditioned. He's been working, I believe he started working in the Warner world when he was like 21 or something. He's in his 70s now. So I'd be curious now there's a new president in that organization who I also think is a good guy. And he had a lot more experience in the world before he was a part of that organization. But why is he not stepping up to the plate and saying, hey, no, we're changing some things? And there are people of the few staff members that are still on board there that should be fired for what they have done to people and just the amount of money they've cost the organizations in lawsuits.
Yeah. Well, and I wouldn't bet that the new guy isn't stepping up and saying something.
Huh?
But I'm also not surprised at all that if he is challenging the status quo, nothing's changing.
Why do you think that would be?
I got trained to do my job from very little background. So I was running worldwide payroll in I don't know how many countries and interacting with a team of accountants and local legal experts and dealing with all of the payroll everywhere in the world as one person. I got trained for that. We brought in a
By
benefits
them.
manager by them.
Because I'm only saying
And,
that because we have hints of some illegal
yeah,
behavior on their part
by
regarding
them.
payroll.
And, I leveraged the resources I could leverage. I dug into SHRM, was reading legal code from the various states that we operated in. I did my research, but ultimately I was trained on the job. Doesn't mean I'm not a hell of a powerhouse when it comes to payroll processing, but I didn't have 20 years, 30 years in the industry in my pocket when I arrived in the organization. And I watched those professionals get hired and chewed up and spat out.
Oh, people who did have that experience. Yeah. Because
We
there's
brought on a couple of benefit managers who demanded that people be given the benefits they were entitled to without forcing people to cash out their accrued vacation before they could file for FMLA, before they shit that's illegal. It's like, no, you can't make people take unpaid time. You have to, you can't penalize people for being on government programs that are appropriate to them. You can't fuck with their insurance because they're not drawing money from you any further.
I wonder if it was legal for them to deny me medical care when I went off staff and became just an employee.
No.
See, who knew?
No, because employees are technically always only part-time.
Well, and staff and employee doesn't mean anything in the real world. That's an internal distinction. If you're on a salary, you're on a salary.
Well, and that gets into the whole, a full-time work week is 60 hours. If you're working 40 hours, you're part-time.
At Landmark?
That's crazy.
World, right?
Yeah. Yeah, at Landmark, not in the world. Now, maybe that's changed. I haven't been in the HR department for many years, but
what about this pay refunds business?
How shit used to be.
I was shocked when I found out, because that's one of the big transgressions that the Warner aides that he demand, and they're all contractors. So that was one of the questions they came to me with, is because they knew that I employed contractors, and they said, is that right? And I said, that does not sound right, but I don't work in the country you work in, so you should talk with a lawyer, which they eventually did. But this whole thing where, you didn't do the job, so I'm going to withhold a certain amount of your pay. And which we now know from the lawyer in that country that actually constitutes domestic slavery. And but I was quite shocked when I found out, and I do lay out one account in my book, of which I have the full backup for the evidence of it happening. But this pay refund business, which I now understand was much more common than I realized inside of the Landmark organization too, where a center manager would withhold 5, 10, even 20% of a staff member's salary. Is that legal? That doesn't seem legal to me, but how do they get away with this stuff, Brian?
Because people don't go to the labor board and fight it. Every single time something happens, and this is the pain in the ass part. They know you're not going to. We're bought in. So
this is where it gets culty, right? We're not, why are we not going to? Because we're not going to risk transformation in the world. Like folks out there listening, and those of you that haven't been in a group like this, I know it sounds crazy. And those of you that have, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because you're not going to risk that people would discredit their transformation.
Well, and you wouldn't put yourself ahead of the difference that's being made.
Yeah, and a cost
Like
benefit analysis,
your
it seems like the cost
your
would be too high.
rights as an employee are not as important as the opportunity to reach millions of people with work that makes a difference in their life. So starting a lawsuit is selfish.
Well, this is
When
where you're speaking right to the moral layer, right? So I have
yeah,
a paper that Chris wrote, just beginning to distinguish this model for ICSA, the International Cultic Studies Institute. And um, the morality layer is the deepest and most stable layer of the R.E.M model. It includes a person's core values, ethical beliefs, and guiding sense of right and wrong, which from the back forms the backbone of personal identity. Morality provides not just rules for behavior, but a narrative of the self, a way to understand one's purpose, goodness, and place in the world. And one of the things about being in groups like this is, and this is the part I've really struggled with understanding this part in the model, and we'll get Chris on here sometime and play with this, but because I recognize now I did violate my own moral standards. But then interestingly, it was the violation of moral standards that popped me out also.
yeah.
Right?
So
So when people
your
are coming to,
violation of moral standards was gradual enough
yeah.
to not shock you into rejection. That's what I
Well,
was
but you
talking about
outlined it
earlier.
really
Like, you
well.
see the things that aren't right. You see things happening. You know that the staff aren't getting paid what they should get paid, but you're going to do the introduction leaders program anyway. You know that things aren't how they should be, but like, we're just going to keep going. And then those things get bigger and bigger and bigger.
And you're
And
given a rationalization. So when you're on your way in, you're given the rationalization for all that, and it makes sense. You're given a narrative, and we see this happening in our world right now. People are being given through propaganda and misinformation and so on, rhetoric, they're being given permission structures. That's that rationalization. And I love Chris points out that the rationalization part almost always is after the behavior, after I've made the choice, after I've witnessed the harm. Now my rationalization layer is going to come in and come up with an explanation for why that was okay. Why in a cost benefit analysis it's okay. Okay, we got it. As staff members, we're going to take really low pay because it enables them to keep the price of the forum low. This is the one I heard. Keep the price of the forum low so as many people as possible have access to it. So that's worth sacrificing for, because I believe that the landmark forum is the most powerful thing that people can do
yeah,
for their own personal power and strength. So that rationalization helps me to address the moral injury
yeah, it
until
puts
it
a
doesn't.
salve on that moral injury that lets it be palatable, even if it's not preferable.
Mm, okay. That's great. That's well
And
said.
then we just learn to eat more of that shit pie.
Mhm.
So,
Because like you said, once you do it once, it gets easier and easier and easier, right?
yeah. And so one of the things in that, like, the that Chris pointed out is the head of the organization finds that scapegoat. And one of the big red flags is when all the credit, but none of the responsibility
Yeah. So
goes to the source.
right.
It's not, it's not L. Ron Hubbard's fault that Scientology did X, Y, and Z, but he's to be praised for all the goodness.
Mm.
And that
Ooh, that's so good.
is
Okay, good. I
a
what I'm saying about
flag in an
yeah.
organization that the same person who is revered is not also held accountable.
Right. So
So
good, Brian.
it was good. And then there was a piece about, he mentions this study of defining emotion
Mhm.
and how there were, I forget how many, but lots of studies, and nobody could agree on a definition for emotion.
Yeah.
Like, and the question was, do we even need a definition?
Mm.
Right? Like, we all have it. We all know it. Does it need to be defined?
Mm.
And the thing that jumped up for me is that, and partly because of all of this like hypersensitivity, like I have a very hypersensitive concept processor
Yes,
as
you
a
do.
result of my engagement. So emotion doesn't function on the rational plane. The definition is an attempt to shove emotion onto the rational plane so it can be picked apart there and
Mm.
analyzed and understood there in a place where it doesn't even exist. So, like, what we're missing is dealing with emotion where emotion lives.
Yes, right,
And it's hard because we don't know how to communicate that way with each other.
right.
At
And we're not
least
we're
at
not
least
given.
in America. I
Yeah,
mean, there are loads of places that deal in all sorts of really awesome stuff that I probably don't even know anything about. Like, there are cultures that are a bit more tuned in to the fact that there's more than the rational mind and the words we speak to each other at play. Your Reiki people, your light healer people, your sound bath people, your I don't know
can I
what
tell
all.
you the Persian people? I've worked a lot with Persian people,
Hmm.
and even in the Middle East when we did those, which we did so that we could host a whole group of Persian people. I was really struck in that culture how much freer people in that Middle Eastern cultures were to express emotion and to care and to love. And especially I always think, Rumi, Rumi is Persian. So
Mhm.
I equate. And I work closely with a number of Persian people, and I'm always actually quite struck by their um, willingness and freedom with love. Which that'll shock a lot of people because they don't think of Middle Eastern cultures like that, but very much. And yeah, it's really interesting. I'm listening to reading. I'm in a year-long neuroscience advanced coaching certification program right now that I'm just absolutely loving. Thank you. Shout out to Be Above Coaching. But we are in the quarter now where we're looking at somatic and emotional interplay. And I'm listening to Lisa Barrett. She's got a three-part name and I'm skipping out on it. But Lisa Barrett, How
Yeah.
Emotions Are Made.
Yeah, I'm halfway through.
I just started listening to it. Yeah, I've been working with it for a while, but I just started listening. I listened to her first book, 7.5 Lessons About the Brain, which it's a good book if I end up with it in Audible, Kindle, and paper. Her books are, I have in all three. And but I'm listening right now to the one about how emotions are made. And one of the things I found striking is I'm in the part where she's talking about, as we've found more and more ways to objectively study emotion, how we're taught, we have these physiological responses, and then we are literally taught or indoctrinated in a certain way to, this response means that emotion. But it doesn't necessarily. One, across cultures, it can be different. And they're talking about how even like facial expressions, were taught that, like, and this is where Chris Shelton just did a great episode debunking NLP is just a load of crap, which, I've had some thoughts about for a while. But, if somebody's looking up, does that mean we used to say in Landmark, oh, that means they're referencing their thinking. I don't know what they're referencing. I don't know what they're doing. But emotions are a little like that. Like, oh, and one of the things that struck me is she said there was a study and that most people can't tell the difference between anxiety and fear. Can't tell, um, even anxiety and depression, like all of these physiological things that we have, I mean, I'm just seconding what you're saying. We have so little understanding of human, and these groups like Landmark that purport to have the answers to human, they have a tiny slice of the pie, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe. I still think if they would actually just operate like that, they'd be fine and they'd be a useful and helpful part of society if they'd say, you know what, we have a little slice of the pie. This is a little slice we know about. What other slices are out there? What do you know about? Oh, that thing you're dealing with? Oh, you should go talk to those people that have that slice of the pie. You're dealing with addiction, you're dealing with trauma, you're dealing with all that. Cause then,
and they'll say that. They'll say we just deal with this and there are lots of other models out there, but then they'll turn around and say that absolutely anything you want for yourself in your life is available out of your being in this program. Anything. So why would you need any of that stuff? Well, we don't say that last part out loud.
well, some do. I've heard it.
Like,
Depends on how desperate that staff person is.
not from the front of the room.
Right. Oh,
Right.
there you go. There you go.
So
Wow.
there's
Okay, what else did you notice in listening to the room?
I loved the separation of rational thought and emotion
Yeah.
and morality and the way that they play with each other. And the thing that struck out about emotion is that emotion is first. And that has been part of my recovery and deprogramming as I engage in therapy outside transformational work. It's like, oh, wait, emotion is first.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to be all out here. It's fucking crazy.
It's
fucking crazy to think that we can just set aside our emotion and return to nothing and create.
No, it's insane.
Insane.
It's not a
to
thing.
not account for, Landmark loves to say that like the context is decisive, that the context gives your available action set. So you really need to be mindful of the context in which you're living. Emotions aren't caused. You aren't causing the matter of whatever surges are going on in your system. So those you need to disregard.
Mm.
As if what's happening inside your fucking body is not the environment in which you are operating.
What a great point. Well, they don't have the definition of context correct. They only have one. Context is two things. It's the external circumstance, what's happening. It's raining. I'm in the office. I'm at my house in Plano, whatever.
Well,
that's half. And then the other half is how you're experiencing that. So those two things together create the context in the actual academic definition.
Instructed to set aside your internals.
You're instructed to set aside the whole thing, including externals even.
Yeah.
Oh, it's raining, so what? So why are you letting
that's not so radical. Disregard that it's raining. You want to go see the concert, go to the fucking concert. You'll get wet.
Right.
Like, okay, cool. Like all the reasons that I used to not do the things I want to do, I can go do them now. And it's like, why did I let that stop me before? Okay. But the danger in setting aside what's happening inside ourselves to manufacture a different internal state that is aligned with the kinds of actions, words, like way of being that we are committed to is the falsehood.
You're basically you're describing sociopathy. I've read this great article from a woman who is a sociopath who wrote this really great essay about, he's writing a book now, which I can't wait to read, about what it's like to grow up as a sociopath, which is not experiencing emotions the way other people experience emotions. Having to learn how to fake it because we live in a world. And one of the very first things she says is we live in a world in which all people are acting from their emotions. Imagine being in that world and being somebody who doesn't feel those things. But she makes a really great point that then, you do get to, are you going to be a good person or a bad person? Like, and are you going to like that? And you have to learn how to mimic those things and you have to learn how to really make choices. To me, the more I study the human potential movement, I don't think it's any accident that we have a seemingly ever increasing number of narcissistic sociopaths, because I swear we've been training ourselves to be that. That has been the high state that we're trying to get to, is where things don't impact me. I can create how feel emotionally, which, like you said, completely defies everything about emotion.
And it's useful to apply rational thought to impact, alter, shove aside, postpone an internal experience to set the stage more effectively for what's about to come. Like, I know before I engage with certain people that I am about to sit in the presence of someone with profoundly different political beliefs than me.
Mm-hmm.
And I anticipate and like let go how I might normally respond
Mm.
so that I can still have these friends at the end of the day and like we have a good time and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Just like, when you walk onto the subway that like people are going to be bumping into you and you got to like tamp down the hypersensitive, like visual, like over observant, like danger response because all the bumps and jostling aren't individual occurrences of danger. Like you got to set the stage emotionally for the scenario you're about to walk into. And when you learn to do that intentionally, it's kind of awesome. But when that becomes the way you cope with trauma
Or even all of life. I mean,
or
yeah.
all of life, that will fuck you up.
Well, because you turn our emotional system is a part of what makes us extraordinary. It's definitely also a part of what puts us at the top of the food chain, so to speak, human beings. But so to deny it or turn it off can be quite
It's
dangerous.
like I
I
ran
know for
around my
women, it's
whole
very dangerous because we will
yeah.
then, the truth is women are harmed at a much higher rate than men. It just is the
Mhm.
case. Okay. And I know there's a really great free masterclass series out there called The Gift of Fear by Gavin Becker, who wrote this fantastic book. I think it was in the late 80s, early 90s. Anyway, and then he did this free masterclass that he makes available on his website that's basically teaching women how to hear their fear response to keep themselves safe, how to differentiate between anxiety and fear, why it's so important to pay attention. And I've been learning that. I mean, this is what I've been working with for the last 5 years with my coach is how to recognize my physiological responses, my emotions, in landmark speak, what's going on with me internally, and actually go, what's that trying to tell me? And then choose, then say, gosh, thank you, body, for letting me know that. Like,
Yeah.
thank you. And it's okay. I saw the cup on the edge of the or whatever it is, right? Like, because your body knows way before your mind almost everything. So to learn how to actually use those physiological responses and emotional responses, and I tie those together because I'm reading Lisa Bear's book and she's talking about how most
Mm.
emotions are a physiological response that we then assign an emotion to. We assign what we understand it to be. So, but I'm only like in the first few chapters, so we'll see. It's a really important aspect of who we are, that emotional piece. And what Chris is pointing to in his model, and I think he just does such a good job with this, is and I can go to David Emerald's work in my favorite, the TED book, The Empowerment Dynamic. So many emotion is what drives behavior. Almost all behavior is being driven by an expression of an emotion. And I'm adapting John Atack's word for social media, which is anti-social media. I have a major practice now. I don't always win at it, but do not respond. Do not hit like. Do not like immediately, whether it's to awe or anger. Those are the two strong emotions that will elicit almost immediate action from any human. So, because we now have all these ways in which those are being elicited and provoked in order to get action. And that is how we are being manipulated, people.
Mhm.
That is how you're being manipulated, is you're being manipulated to act from an emotional response. And we think it's our rationale because that's the voice we hear in our head, but that comes after. That comes when we're trying to explain the thing we just did. And that's what I've really learned from that aspect of the model. And then the moral piece kind of sits there at the heart of it. And a lot of our emotions are associated with what we understand to be right and wrong, what we
Yeah.
understand to be morally
Well, and
acceptable
it's
or not.
we got trained to dissociate like it was a professional skill.
Mhm.
like it was part of successful existence as a human being, is dissociating from your emotions and your reactions and your automated responses. So my whole nervous system is not to be listened to or paid any attention to. And in the wake of setting aside how I feel, how do I feel then? Because anything I create after I set aside who I am is created on a foundation of like self sacrifice, of like self denial.
Yeah.
And we don't like, good God, they or we, when I was in,
Yes.
don't look that far. At like, so you sacrifice how you feel, you just shove it aside, and presumably you'll come back later and deal with it, because who comes back and deals with emotions when they're not fucking feeling them? Let me go back and process the anger that I had 3 days ago, now that I have an hour in my schedule to return to that thing I set aside. No one.
You know what? And to your earlier point where I was sort of letting Werner, as it were, off the hook, you're so right on. Thanks for calling that out. That I asked somebody one time, I've now had many aides, not even just the original set, but others have, since my book, have come and told me stories of being in that work environment. And I remember asking one of them one time, what was that like for you to witness that, to see that, to hear that going on in the other room, like really, I mean, just think the most intense domestic violence. We've all seen it in movies. Just picture that. And there you are. And this person said to me, they said, well, I just thought it was an opportunity to practice separating what's going on with me internally from my performance, from, or something like that. But it was an opportunity to practice disassociating, right? And that's exactly what you're talking about in terms of the danger. Then that is what we train our soldiers in, isn't it? I mean, in our first responders, like we have to send them into dangerous situations in order to save lives and da-da-da-da-da. And so there maybe is a place for that kind of training, but personal development and household work is not one of them. But what I just saw as you were describing that is, well, of course that becomes the culture of this organization, the leader's perspective, the leader's ideas and leadership in that is the gospel. It is the truth. It is. And then everything rationalizes itself around that. All, I remember, I think it was you actually, I had a whole conversation one time about impeccability. Well, pretty sure Werner has some serious maybe OCD problems or whatnot, because there's like a kind of a level of impeccability that's not normal that's required, but we would bring in those, right? Oh, it's just about workability and impeccability and da 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 da. That the eye drop container had to be at this exact measurement in this exact direction at this exact place from the computer to the edge of the da 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 da. Yeah. Well, the truth is, for workability, it just has to be within reach. It doesn't have to be positioned this exact way and measured exact, all that kind of stuff. So this rationalization comes in after to explain the behavior. And the behavior, I can see now this is what I was describing in my book, because I was like, well, that's kind of weird. Well, that's kind of weird. Well, that's kind of weird. But 9 years of, well, that's kind of weird, but nobody's getting hurt, until I learned somebody was, and then it was a problem, right?
Well, that's the stage for when he has dementia. And the eye drops are always in the same fucking place. Like it's the stage for...
Time he has dementia, trust me, which might be now.
It's the stage for workability in ways that aren't necessary currently.
But I don't think it's any of it's about that. This isn't, it really just is about, I want it this fucking way.
Sure.
And it's very likely an expression of, I mean, the biggest way I can sort of deal with my own cognitive dissonance around Werner is to assume that he's unwell.
I mean, I'm over here thinking about working at Starbucks, right? And the fucking 2% milk goes on the goddamn top shelf of that fridge. Stop putting your non-fat milk on the top shelf in the middle of your 2% milks. I should be able to open the door, grab a jug from the right location, because they're always in the same place.
Now that's workability though. But see, you're actually trying to perform a task that's
3 drinks a minute, just put it back in the right spot. Right.
No, that's workability. So that's funny you said that.
Where it has value, and then where it's like taken too far.
Well, that's the line. And
Yeah.
we so often don't know where those lines are. So this has been really, 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 really valuable, Brian. Thank you so much for kind of taking time. And we could kind of go on forever and ever and ever. You're one of my favorite people to pull some of this stuff apart with because you're so masterful in the inside world and your outside. And guys, that's what it takes to deconstruct, to learn. You've got to get outside the world and then start talking to people that weren't in the world of whatever you're deconstructing. And then just begin to examine it from all these different angles. And for me, what this show is about is finding the line between help and harm, between value and no value, between manipulation, where manipulation comes into play versus choice. And why? Because we live in a world that's doing its best. There's so many agents and people out there that want be in charge of you, want to be in charge of how you think, how you move, what you buy, especially in the United States. I just got back from Europe and it always amazes me how much more breathing room there is over there. Like you can actually you're not, unless you're in one of the markets. I didn't like Istanbul for this reason, because it was really clear when I was in Istanbul, I was a commodity. Like I was a commodity. I was there to buy stuff. I was a tourist commodity. Greece, northern Greece was wonderful because everybody's you're just there to be a people. And it was wonderful. But so thank you for exploring this. Any last words or anything that you wanted to say that didn't get said in this round or that we'll
Good
pick up
Lord.
next time?
I don't know. There's we'd only covered half my notes on the REM stuff.
Okay,
We
we'll come
really
back.
did go
Maybe
on
we'll do
forever.
an episode with Chris.
But
That would be super fun.
that'd be awesome. I have love and respect for people who are bought in to systems that I've carefully extricated myself from. And part of my trauma and healing and my own personal work and my own moral, we didn't even talk about the moral stuff. Part of my moral makeup is finding room to love people no matter what. And there are places where I just straight up objectively fail, usually centered around politics. And
well, it's
that
hard as those kinds of things where I find that gets hard. No, we'll cut it into 2 episodes. Anyway, where it gets hard is when there's real world objective impact, when people are getting hurt. That's why I find when you told me that they've gone to the dark side, the Ann Peterson side, whatever. And I'm like, I'm a side? Like what? And the only side I'm on is the side of no harm, right? So no deliberate harm. No, even though I made the statement that I believe a lot of the harm is unintentional. Yes, in the conscious mind, but at a certain point, look, when you've been sued over 20 times for the same stuff, it stops
doesn't
being unintentional.
well, and even if you haven't been, that doesn't mean you're not responsible
For the
for
impact.
what happened to people at in your presence, whether you're the one that did it or you're the one on the moral injury observation side of things. At the end of the day, you either did it or you allowed it to happen. And if you were bought in, you were bought in. That just means you've got more to make up for once you get out.
I find it really interesting how much I'm just noticing about myself, and you're raising the bar on me, and I really appreciate it, because I notice I'm very willing to hold myself to something, to a standard. Like I wrote my book because I couldn't be complicit. To not say, to not tell felt like I was stuck in it. I was that, and I didn't want to be that. I wanted to come out and say no. And I did it in the only way that I felt was available to me, right? But I'm also noticing just in our conversation today, I'm still very, very willing to not hold others to that standard. And I don't need to I'm not the boss of you, and I don't need to be the boss of people. That's an aspect of myself I've been unwinding because it's just exhausting, frankly. But it is interesting how far I will go to rationalize away other people's apathy, other people's lack of doing.
Yeah.
And I wonder what that's about. I wonder what
Well,
that is really. Like, I think about those people over there, and I think about people I know specifically, Harry and Mick Levitt and whatnot. And the truth is, I liked those people. I liked Werner. It's hard to deal with that he hurts people the way he hurts people, that he may not be the person that I thought he was. It feels like that's where the rub is. That's where it gets hard.
Okay. Yeah. And like, they don't have to be exclusive.
Right.
Because we can hold all of it and come to grips and adjust and balance. And
Yeah,
that's
like I said, we can hold both
that's
things, right?
the way that rationalization, emotion, and morals function. They're fluid together, integrating, separating, reintegrating, like coming apart, coming together, fitting differently as we grow and adapt. Like there's nothing wrong
Well,
with.
that's interesting. So Helen Gahuli just passed away, right? So somebody, a long, 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 one of the original SD people, wonderful woman. I worked very closely with her. I keep kind of checking in with myself. How do I feel about that? Mostly, I don't think that this is our only reality. I think when we pass away, we go into another reality. And she was older and frail. And, so mostly when people pass away and it was kind of their time, I just feel happy for them, honestly, like, oh, they're free now, and whatnot. But one of the things I've been reconciling with many of the people I knew, and Helen's one of them. I know that Helen knew about the abuse because people told her. She was one of the handful of people. And I really, I have a little bit of a hard time with that. Like, why are these people that I admired, I looked up to, that I thought were so transformed, whatnot, why didn't they say anything? Why didn't they do anything? And, and the answer I've kind of come to is, well, they were indoctrinated too. You know what I mean? Like they were that's why I started asking the question, wait, is it a cult? Because it was the only thing that could explain that to me. Right? It is the sort of cult mentality. There does seem to be a moral permission structure. Like, what I mean by that is a permission structure inside these human potential groups, because it was there in NXIVM, it's there in Scientology, it's there in Insight, it's there in Context, it's
Well,
there everywhere.
it's that transformation is an appropriate remedy. And that's untrue.
What do you mean it's an appropriate remedy? Because it's not really a remedy. They're
I
not
mean,
remedying. They're like
you choke
tolerating.
someone. We had a conversation. You had this big aha moment about how that's not okay. Like your view of how to handle those situations altered in a moment. Like, I trust you. You've transformed. I'm not going to hold the past against you. That's not what we do here. Like
I see. So you're saying that somebody
that
who did
that
that kind of behavior.
inside it, because it's leveraged as a discipline, go transform yourself and come back, and you can't sit back down at your desk until you've demonstrated that you've transformed sufficiently for me to accept blah 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 blah. Like,
Yeah.
go prove that you transformed so that I can trust you to do your job. And then there's, buddy, you fucked up. Tell me about that. Okay, we're going to get to a point where you like really like see something, and something alters in your being about the way you deal with these sorts of things in the future. Okay, your being's altered. Now we don't need to report you to the authorities. We're not going to, because that would be a disruption to the work. That would, like, it's never going to happen again. Like, everybody's been taken care of and
Is this
satisfied.
the HR approach? I just got probably
All
like talking to one of the HR guys here.
over. It's all over.
Oh,
But then you've got the people who aren't on the inside enough to get that kind of treatment. Like you had pornographic material in your desk drawer, you're fired. Like there's no coming back, there's no turning around, there's no nothing. Which probably more appropriate. But the through things and like physically assaulted people, and like the victim was told to just get over it. That trauma, by the way, trauma is only an interpretation of what happened. That's a story you tell
that's another
yourself.
whole problem. Yeah.
That like you're just playing the victim to dominate other people. You need to get over it.
This is where the lack of training, that the leaders
That's
don't have any training outside of that set, is a problem.
But those conversations were happening at a corporate headquarters office for this kind of company. That's how employees in that environment were coached and developed.
Right.
That's what the highest level of worker in the organization was exposed to. Whether it happened to you or you saw it, or you kept headphones on so you didn't have to hear it or see it. Whatever it was, there are things that were so broken. There were things that were so fucking awesome, but there are things that were so broken.
Right.
That
or irreparable, actually.
It did. And then, how do you go to the fucking union labor board in California and say, I have sustained a moral injury?
Right.
Right.
Well, interestingly,
but who knows how to do that? We don't know that those things are even possible.
Well, you know who knows how to do that? Interestingly, I just want to little kudos to California here. Jennifer Coons, who, part of the episodes with the LA staff, it was actually the doctors that she was seeing in an emergency room situation because they didn't know she was having a stroke or whatnot. And they saw all this stuff. It was the doctors who literally took her offline. Like they took her offline. They contacted the labor board. The labor board stepped in and operated on her behalf, put her on leave, dictated to Landmark what they could and couldn't do. And of course, Landmark ultimately fires her, of course. And that's the thing people don't realize. When you're the victim of this kind of abuse and this level of coercion, you can't speak for yourself. You cannot speak for yourself. Also, when you have a certain level of trauma, I deal with this with my daughter who has complex trauma. There are things that I think as a 33-year-old woman, she should be able to do, and she can't. And I've had numerous health professionals say, no, that's not appropriate to expect her to do that thing because she's not at a place where she can do that thing. And you need to do that thing for her or with her or whatever. And that's been a big lesson. And that really happened a lot. There's been a few staff members, some ended up, say it takes 7 to 10 years to even recognize you've been abused or you've been in an abusive situation. Most statute of limitations run out way before that. In Landmark, your employment contract says you have a month to bring complaint. So now you got to fight the contract that you signed as well, just to even get to the place where you can say. So the whole system is kind of rigged, but there are things out there. And that was one I was really impressed when Jennifer told us that story about how the California Department of Labor, the state Department of Labor stepped in on her behalf. And honestly, she was already contemplating suicide that she shared with us in that episode. Had they not, Jennifer might not be with us today. So, thank you to the people who do step in to stop this stuff. And I think part of what you're pointing to is more of us could probably do that.
Well,
if we learn to what we are seeing.
It costs money to hire the person you fired because they stood up for the right thing. And if it happened more often, change would be more likely.
Right.
But it's hard when that's your family. That's your only network. That's
when it's
your
fulfilling
sense
of fundamental emotional needs. That's the thing that I think is so powerful about Chris's model is that interplay between the emotional needs. So when the moral conflicts come up, you're going to probably default to those emotional needs, at least for a while, until it's too egregious somehow. Like, so for me, the strangulation and all that was too egregious, too much.
Well, you wind up with the hook, the thing that gets people into these sorts of organizations in the first place. There's an emotional and moral issue whose resolution is promised. And it could be anything. I did the Landmark Forum when I was 18, 19. Banged out the Landmark Forum, the advanced course, and the self-expression leadership program all over the course of like a summer and into fall, back to back. And then shortly after that, my Army unit deployed. So I'm all young, bright, shiny, idealistic, full of possibility and like
not
ideology.
A full prefrontal cortex.
And then I'm in a war zone. And then I come back and like everything I believe about myself and humanity is gone. Like who I trusted myself to be, I violated. What I believed about, I heard in your conversation with Chris, at some point you started to question the fundamental goodness of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's real.
It's been the most challenging thing of the last couple of years.
And
for me
like
personally.
gets us into hot water is those emotional moral conflicts where a remedy that's too good to be true is presented.
Mm.
And what gets us out, and part of why I think, and you probably don't like talking about the details. You don't want to revisit what's actually happened to people. You don't want to
Well,
quite engage.
I haven't felt yet like it's mine to tell. I wanna give them an
Yeah,
opportunity
for
to
sure.
tell.
It Those are the things that cause a break in us. Like something eventually happened where enough was enough. And the emotional, moral injury of that moment was enough. So it broke, like we were willing to give up what we thought we knew, what we thought we could trust, everything that we had invested, all that sunk cost bias, all the God, you could have episode upon episode of all the biases at play once you're on the inside of an organization like that.
Mhm.
Edging back from the details holds back the moral injury that's necessary for change to be ignited.
Mm.
When people
So are you
know
saying,
what's
like, we have to it's like as we just, again, look out into the political landscape, when we see a pastor standing there praying and being hit with a rubber bullet or whatever it was that he was hit with.
and taking that off the news is a disservice.
Mm.
It hides a piece of the truth that if it were widely spread would ignite response.
That's really interesting. There's a flip side. That's a lot to think about. Thank you. For me personally, I felt like I want to give people a chance to tell their own stories. There's some legal
Sure.
reasons to be wary, just to be protective. When I do tell something, folks, you can be assured I have backup for it. I have documentation, or I have somebody who has said, yes, you can tell my story and I will go under oath to vouch for it. You know what I mean? Like that. So there's that, but that's pretty easy to manage once you know the rules. But then there's this other thing where in one of my other lives, I want to be a journalist. Like I always wanted to
Mhm.
be a journalist. And so like where we found out, like giving the names of these people who are doing these mass shootings, for example, um, actually they're starting to find sort of psychologically opens up the space for others, right? So they're trying to find a line. So they, in the news industry, they found a while ago too, like there's very careful ways they report on suicide, for example, because after there was a suicide that would happen that had some notoriety, suicides would go up, and they started to notice this. So I think about all those things, but I'll tell you the number one thing I think about is I don't want people to hurt. So this is another place where I'm like, okay, I'm willing for me to hurt. I'm willing for me to deal with the cognitive dissonance and the moral injury, but I don't want to be the one that causes that for others. And that's something that I think I need to continue to grow up about in my own maturity and maturation. Not that I need to become somebody that hurts people, but I don't always need to be the one that takes the hurt for others. See, I'm one of those ones like those center managers that would have taken all the abuse to protect the graduates. I'm in that kind of personality camp, which I'm grateful for. Don't
Yeah.
plan to change that. But there's a
Yeah.
maturity that I think you're pointing to where you trust people with themselves, because it's kind of condescending to assume that you somehow know, that I somehow
Yes.
know, what's going to hurt, right? There's a maturity that comes with saying, hey, no, guys, this is what happened, and putting it out there. And I have started to talk more. I've now started to talk about, a lot of people don't understand that where Alan Kahn confesses to strangling one of his staff members is so startling and so shocking to me, is because he knows that's the primary physical abuse move, the kind of culmination of the physical assault move that Werner perpetrates on his staff. And he had been entrusted with that. People had been coming to him. He was one of a very small group of people that other people who'd experienced that kind of harm had come to and asked for help and support. And never once did he let on to any of us that he had perpetrated that same kind of harm. And so that's why that
Because
was
it's
so like
justified
rock.
and acceptable to behave that way,
Yeah.
given how senior he is. And that's the kind of fucked up inside stuff.
Wow.
It's hard to understand on the outside,
And we
but
can't
it
learn
wouldn't
from it.
fly anywhere else.
I feel like part of what you're saying is we can't learn from it until we bring it up. And I do think I mean, I think that Alan had, at least in his own mind, he had motivations for saying that. I mean, I think he was trying to fall on the sword for the organization because he knows that that was the big yucky secret that was going to come out as these cases around Werner progress. So I think he was trying to burst that bubble.
Well,
But
and
in my world, he didn't do that. He actually showed, whoa, wait a minute. That behavior's going on even with somebody like Alan, who is, as far as I know, a fundamentally peace-loving, heart-centered guy, that he can be coerced in a way by an environment to do that. Talk about moral injury.
well, it's a desensitization,
Right.
a gradual. He's been in for what, 30 years?
Years, yeah.
You desensitize to things,
Yeah.
and like
And
more
has
and
a
more becomes
rationalization,
acceptable. Yeah,
which he displays completely in that episode. I mean, he lays the
yeah.
whole thing out, the behavior and then the rationalization.
What I was trying to point to is, you wrote your book to address your own sense of culpability to the moral injury,
And to warn. That was my big
right?
motivation at the time,
Well,
to warn people.
you know, you didn't have to publish it. You
Mm-mm.
could have just written it.
Yeah, well, then I wouldn't
And
have warned people, but yeah.
yeah, so you did publish it,
Mhm.
even though it was going to make people uncomfortable, even though it was going to say things that people probably didn't want to hear, even though it was going to disrupt the rainbows and unicorns for
Yes.
some folks,
Yeah.
right? So you, in one sense, you're ready to say what happened, even if it burst someone's bubble. But there's probably something a little different about this other permutation of saying what's actually happening. It feels different somehow. It's like you don't have quite the same freedom to just let it out, but it's the letting it out that starts the conversation.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying you should go tell other people's stories. Like, that's dicey. It's
Well, but you know
stressful.
what we can do, Brian? We can invite them to come on Confronting the Line and tell their own stories,
And that's,
and to help them find ways to tell those stories.
yeah.
Whether it's in this public of a format, there's other formats that aren't quite so public, the Healthy Healing Group, there's a fantastic, amazing resources and whatnot. But for sure, you gotta talk about it, folks. You do. He's right about that. You're really right about that. You can't, kind of like you are what you swallow, you know?
Well, and if you're willing to let other people keep swallowing the poison you put down because you're not going to say anything, I mean, that's a choice. And I'm not here to like guilt anybody into telling or not telling. But like, if you want to make a difference, sharing your nightmare can wake other people up.
Right. Right. Well, and that's how we evolve. That's how we move forward as a society. I mean, everybody's learning about the 3.5% rule, right? Like it's 3.5% of people standing up, speaking out, acting in some way, shape, or form, whether it's marching in streets, boycotting, different, there's many, many actions, all of them peaceful, please, people.
Hmm.
But I remember when I first read that study, which I heard about that a couple of years ago, actually, that, um, this incredible academic, I can't think of her name right now, um, follow the Illuminate newsletter because I references a lot and put that material out there. But that it only takes 3.5%. It doesn't take 50%. It doesn't take 60%. It takes 3.5% of people standing up and saying, you know what? I think this is wrong. Or I think this isn't right. Or I think this is the right thing. You know what I mean? And like standing for it. It doesn't take tons, but it does take some being willing to stand
Yeah.
up and say, and I do invite graduates, whether it's of Landmark or other organizations, because there's a lot more. I mean, I talk about Landmark because that's my direct experience, but I really do want to acknowledge that there are many, many, many inside contexts, so many organizations that came out of that whole Est era, Scientology. All roads lead back to Est, and Est leads to Scientology. And Scientology comes from, what's her name, Madame Blavatsky or something. Anyway, listen to Chris and John to get that whole story. It's totally fascinating. John's new book that just came out. He just sent it to me. I'm very excited to read. So, but yeah, we have to educate ourselves. We have to speak up. We have to understand.
And I want to point out that conversation that we just had was leveraging an emotional, moral conflict to produce a result, right? It's the same shit that goes down when someone's trying to get you into something.
Yeah.
Like I'm interested in getting people in to telling their stories. We there isn't some shadow organization going on over here.
No.
But how are you supposed to know? Right? How are you supposed to know when you get invited to a special evening about the Landmark Forum that there's a bunch of shady shit going down and that the emotionally connected, morally, receptive conversations for the challenges you're facing in life and the offer of something that would make life better occurs as compassionate? And it probably actually is, but it puts you in some waters where they don't tell you about the sharks.
Right.
Now, I don't even know what sharks to warn you about if you decide to come share about what you've been through in one of those kinds of organizations or in whatever kind of trauma it is that you've been dealing with. I can't warn you of what the consequences might be, but I can tell you there'll probably be some.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference is what you're already said, how do we encourage people to come forward? There are places to speak that aren't as public. There are, I'm interested in people healing and having the freedom to express what they've been through so they don't have to hold it inside themselves forever.
That's really beautiful, Brian. Thank you. That's really great. And thank you for providing that space for me as well, because I do still default into I'll hold it, I'll process it. I've got the training, I've got the support, just a kind of service, but there's a line where it's of service and there's a side where it's of disservice as well, because you can't do that work for another. You cannot do emotional, spiritual healing. You cannot do any kind of healing for another. Actually, you can only do healing for yourself. And so, yeah, that's really great. Wow. Thank you. All right. Well, I think we should wrap it up now. This has been really, I'm full, lots to think about and lots more to say. And I'm excited. I'll link a note to your podcast in your show notes. I look forward to coming and being a guest there. I think there's not enough of us talking. Let's keep talking in all the different angles. And I really appreciate the deep insight that you're bringing to where trauma and self-help intersect.
Mm.
It's really important, really important. So thank you for being a voice willing to explore that so publicly and so openly so that the rest of us can learn. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Anne.
Yeah, thank you. More to come, folks.
Hey, folks. So that was the second half of my long conversation with Brian. Really juicy and kind of intense stuff there. So I hope you took care of yourself as you listened. And I just want to give a shout out once again for the Healthy Healing group that I host featuring Rachel Bernstein. She's the primary sort of facilitator and listener. She is an incredible therapist in relationships, family, and marriage relationships, as well as an educator in the whole cult identification and recovery space. So just want to shout out again, if you have been a leader or a big time volunteer or assistant or especially staff member in a culture like Landmark, in a high control group where you think you may have experienced, whether you're ready to call an injury or not, we didn't all necessarily experience that, but you definitely feel like there's some impacts, there's some bugs still implanted that you want to take apart and understand, please consider joining us at the Healthy Healing Group. Link is in the show notes. Thank you very much for listening. Please do like, subscribe, If you have the ability, hit that little YouTube membership button, help us a little bit to continue to fund this great content and continue to tell these stories and get these ideas out there. Thank you.